So when I was around 9 or 10 years old, my cousin Kyriana and I used to go on little adventures in the thick wooded foresty area behind my grandma's house. It was like one of those really thick foresty, mystical, you know what I'm talking about? Like the ones where it seems like the trees have stories to tell when you're walking through it. Our grandma constantly told us not to venture too far into the forest. Like she had given us boundary points, like we knew which trees we were not supposed to cross. Like we weren't supposed to cross the stream that was back there. But we were little kids and we thought we were completely invincible, so what do you think we did? We decided to go in there. One summer afternoon, we decided to pack a couple juice boxes, a couple flashlights with dying batteries. A rookie mistake, I might add. Also packed a couple of those oatmeal chocolate chip granola bars. So we took our packs and we ventured way further into the woods than we were ever supposed to go. And I'm talking miles. I'm not just talking like we went past the stream. We went miles. We went on like a full-blown hike. Anyways, after a bit of walking, we came across this cave. It didn't look like much at first. It was just kind of like a little gap in the hillside that was covered by like vines or like leaves, not trees, you know what I mean? I remember there being a cold breeze coming from inside of the cave, and on a really hot summer day, that felt amazing. That was so intriguing for us. We had just gone on a trek. We were ready for nature's AC. Neither one of us even hesitated after we felt the cold air. We were just ready for it. We crawled in there, daring each other to go deeper, giggling. I remember we thought that it was the funniest, most silliest thing ever. We're crawling inside the side of a mountain. At first, the cave was kind of fun. We thought that the echo that we could make inside the cave was like some sort of sorcery. It was nothing like we'd ever heard. On the ground was like moss and old leaves. But the further that we got into the cave, the colder that it got. I mean, obviously. We got to a point in the cave where literally all of the sounds around us just ceased to exist. Like, I have never heard silence to that level before since that incident. Like, I mean silence so heavy that it felt like it was gonna combust my brain. I don't know. And obviously we should have turned around then, but we did not. We kept egging each other to go on further and further and further to see who was the bravest. Eventually we got to another point in the cave where our flashlights started flickering. At that point, I remember the air smelling kind of like stone, like wet stone, you know, after it rains and it gets on the stones, it smells kind of like, I don't know how to explain it other than that. I'm sure you know. And also I kind of smelled something like pennies. A very metallic-y kind of smell. And maybe a little bit like rotting wood, like wet rotting wood. After I kind of took note of that in my brain, that's when we started to hear kind of like this low hum. It was like a jump scare, seriously, amidst the silence of the cave. But we were deep enough inside the cave that there's no way that it could have been like wind or noise from the outside of the cave. Plus we could feel vibrations on the floor as the humming was, you know, making it sound. I remember Kai squeezed my hand as hard as she could. She was so scared. She was the youngest of us both. But I remember right in that moment, as she grabbed my hand, we were looking around at the walls of the cave with our flashlights. And I shit you not, on the walls of the cave, it looked like someone or something had like carved out symbols and like little scratches in the walls of the cave. I don't know if they were fresh or if they had been there for a while, but in my child brain, I was like, those are fresh, something's here, something was trying to claw their way out of here. And that's not even the scariest part, because literally right after that is when our flashlights decided to die. Pure black, pitch black, can't see your hand in front of your face. Like your eyes are open, but you're seeing those swirls of color like your eyes are shut. We froze. We both held our breath and clutched each other. We literally weren't breathing. I could feel my chest still and her chest still and just the beating of our hearts. We were not breathing. And even when we talk about this today, she even says, I was not fucking breathing in that moment either, bitch. But we heard breathing. We heard heavy, like wet breathing. And that's when our fight or flight kicked in. We booked it back out the exit of that cave. I don't even know how we got back, honestly. Like instinct kicked in that moment. I just remember scraping my hands along the cave while I was running just to make sure that I was like not gonna run into anything. My hands were so scraped and chafed up after that. Meanwhile, I was dragging Kai with me from behind just to make sure that she was with me. Cause like I said, she was the younger of us two. I shouldn't even have taken her out there at all. I remember as I was running out of the cave with her in tow, I felt something like wrap around my ankle. It was like slimy, almost like seaweed in the ocean feels when it wraps around your ankle. But honestly, I can't tell you what that was, but I just remember the feeling of something slimy wrapping around my ankle as I ran. Whatever it was, I could not stop to find out. I just kept going and going and going and going. Instinct, run, 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 run. Stay alive, get back to grandma. Like, fuck. And finally, after what seemed like hours of running, we finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel, which was the opening of the cave, of course. We crawled out of there so fast, one of my shoes fell off. I probably one of my sneakers is literally still in that cave. By the time we got out of the cave, it was like almost nighttime. Like, we had been gone for hours at this point. And when we got back to our grandma's house, she didn't even yell at us, and like, it's like she almost knew what happened. She looked at us and she just had this weird look on her face, like she just knew what we did. Here's where it gets even weirder, because later that night, Kai told me that she had seen something inside the cave. She said that off in the distance of the darkness of the cave, she had seen two eyes that were too round to be human, and they blinked at her twice. We went back into the woods the next day because we were hoping to find the cave in the daylight, but for some reason, we literally couldn't find it again. And we had tracked where we went, yo, like we didn't go in any different direction, like it was nowhere to be found. It was like the cave never existed. I just wanted to go get my sneaker back, you know? I was hoping that like I just reached my hand back into the opening of the cave to grab it. But yeah, that could have ended way worse than it did, but it was definitely a traumatizing, horrifying moment of my life.
This is why you should always do a ton of research before moving into a new place or house, because if the rent is way too cheap, there might be a reason behind it. Evan had just recently landed his dream job. The only problem was that it was about 2 hours away from where he currently lived. So the 2-hour commute there and back was insane. He finally decided that it was time for him to move closer to his job. He started looking at places. The only problem was that everything was extremely expensive. They wanted the first month's rent, last month's rent, they wanted a down payment, they wanted his kidney, like it was insane. He was constantly looking, but nothing ever came through, or he would get rejected. Finally, one day he comes across this listing of this apartment that wasn't too far from his job. When he went to look at it, the apartment looked nice. It was like a 2-bedroom, like modest apartment. They only wanted $500 a month for this apartment. They didn't want a deposit. He didn't have to put like a down payment. They literally just wanted the $500. He could have moved in right away. When he asked like the landlord about this, like, well, like, is there anything wrong with the apartment? Like, why is it so cheap? The landlord pretty much told him that she understood how hard it was to get an apartment and to get started. And she was doing this out of the goodness of her heart because she didn't really need the money. He pretty much said, say no more, and ended up moving in. Like that following weekend, he moved all his stuff down, and his cat also came with him. Now from day one, once he was like settled in, he noticed that the apartment had like a weird moldy smell. When he asked the landlord about it, she told him that it was because there was a river nearby, and sometimes it just attracts a lot of moisture. So Evan just decided to get a bunch of plugins and like candles and just call it a day. He figured that he could probably live with the moldy smell for $500 a month. This is when things started to get a little bit crazy. Anytime Evan would step out of the apartment, his cat would cry uncontrollably, almost like the cat was in extreme pain. So much so that the neighbors started to complain, and Evan ended up having to take the cat to live with his aunt while he was living in that apartment, because the cat could not be left there. Like, no matter what he did, the cat was completely just like terrified of being in the apartment. Once the cat left, it was almost like things took a turn for the worse. Evan then started having extremely like demonic type dreams. He was being paralyzed in his sleep. He had a 2-bedroom apartment. He only was in the 1 bedroom. The 2nd bedroom was by completely like empty. He would always hear footsteps in that room. He would hear voices. He would hear knocking. His breaking point was when he woke up in the middle of the night because he was being dragged by something he couldn't see out of his bed. Like something was literally dragging him out of bed. He ended up calling his aunt, who was very spiritual. He kind of told her what was going on, and she recommended this lady that does cleansings. She was like, you should call this lady. She'll come and cleanse your apartment. It seems like your apartment is haunted. He was never really a believer in any of that stuff, but he was so desperate that he decided to call the lady, and the lady came. The minute she walked in, she told him, she was like, there's something very dark and heavy in your apartment. You definitely need a cleansing. He says that she went ahead and started lighting like some like incense, and she's like spreading things around, and things felt like they had calmed down for like a day or two, but then it came back even worse. Like whatever the lady did pissed this thing off. He was now waking up with bruises, and he was on the verge of losing his job. I thought I just saw something. I should probably stop recording in the basement. But Evan was getting ready to lose his job because he was losing so much sleep from being awake through all of these like attacks that he was getting ready to get fired. He went to the landlord and practically begged her so he could break the lease. She told him no, that he couldn't break the lease, that if he did broke the lease, that he should look at the fine print, that he would owe her a large amount of money, that his only option was to just stay in the apartment and tough it out. When he explained to her why he wanted to leave, she told him that he was pretty much crazy, that there was nothing wrong with the apartment, and that she wasn't gonna break the lease over like paranormal stuff, that she didn't believe in anything of that sort. He ended up going to his job and talking to them about like the possibility of working remote. Thankfully they agreed, so he decided to close down the apartment and move 2 hours back home and just work remote while continuing to pay for this apartment that he wasn't even living in for the remainder of that year. Once the year mark came and he paid the last $500 to that lady, he went and he ended the lease. On his way out, he ran across her nephew. They were talking. The nephew asked him, like, how was it living in that apartment? And Evan explained to him, like, everything that went on, and even told him how he wasn't even there for half the time because of how crazy things got. Then the nephew told him that he didn't understand why his aunt had rented out that apartment, because that apartment was notorious for being haunted, that any person that had ever lived in there has never lasted more than like a month, because they all express feeling things and being dragged and like being paralyzed. Apparently the person who lived there like years ago was a lender. He lended money to like people in like the neighborhood, and if the person wouldn't pay him back, he would come after the person, he would torture them, he would unalive them or their family. So he was hated by the community. One day a bunch of people got together, went to his house, that apartment, and ended up unaliving him and his wife. And after that, the apartment was extremely haunted. So yeah, once Evan ended the lease, he left and never heard of that place ever again. Those people or those ghosts or demons are probably still in that apartment today.
Let's read a scary story that was DM'd to me. This one is actually really scary, and I think you're gonna really like this one. And it's pretty long, so buckle up. I used to live in a small town in Texas. My parents still live there today, and so does my brother and his wife. But I just can't go back because of what happened this night. I don't know if it has anything to do with what I experienced, but I had lost a brother years before this, and I saw him the night he died after begging to see him one more time because I felt like I would die if I didn't. I now wonder if I somehow unknowingly opened a door that I should have left closed. Anyway, there's this little man-made old graveyard in the town I had been investigating for years just for fun. I'm not a pro or anything, but I've done enough of these at this graveyard and other places, and I don't scare easily. Usually, it's just quiet nights and cold spots. Maybe a glimpse of something, nothing crazy. The place isn't big, only a few graves and some trees scattered around. No fence, it's pretty open and surrounded by bushes and trees and just empty fields, and 2 little houses in the back that belong to the family that take care of the graveyard. I've been there a bunch, both day and night. Like I said, I had been coming to this graveyard for years, and I knew every headstone by heart. That night, I had been out there for a while already, a good 30 minutes, maybe longer. Everything was calm, nothing weird, although to be honest, from the time I got there, something just didn't feel right, but I ignored it and continued my investigation. I was walking through towards the back, towards the houses again, when I noticed her standing near one of the trees. It threw me off because I hadn't seen her before, and I would have noticed someone else walking around. It's open enough that you can see the whole place from pretty much anywhere, but she was just suddenly there, like she popped up out of nowhere. And the air, I don't really know how to describe it, but it changed. It no longer felt safe. The slight breeze that had been happening that night stopped, like the wind itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen. She had on blue jeans and a blue hoodie. One of the few houses around had a light on outside, and it was hitting her from behind, so she was outlined in light, but her front was dark. I couldn't see her face at all. I remember feeling ridiculous because I immediately felt afraid, because I noticed that suddenly everything had gone quiet, and even the crickets that had been chirping earlier went quiet. Mind you, I had been investigating haunted places by myself and with others for years, and I had never been this afraid. Unfortunately, by this time, I had a lot happening in my life, and I haven't ever been this afraid. It was like a primal, instinctual fear. But something about her just felt off. But where I come from, when you show up to investigate somewhere and someone else is already there, it's just common courtesy to say hi. Let them know you're around so you don't mess with their investigation or accidentally scare them. So I did. I put my feelings aside, convinced myself I was being ridiculous, and decided to talk to her. I said, hey, but I didn't get a response, so I tried again. I said, hey, sorry if I distracted you. I didn't know anyone else was here. Do you live in this small town? which I knew she didn't because it's a small town. Even if you don't know everyone personally, you get used to seeing people around, and you know when you see someone if they live there or not. But I was just trying to get her to talk to me. And I kept talking to her, trying to be polite. I don't even remember what I was saying, I just remember her silence. Still nothing. No sound, no movement, just standing there. So I started walking a little bit backward the way I had come. I have never felt that fear and unease. I realized that the way that she was holding herself didn't seem normal. Don't get me wrong, she was standing there like a normal person, but she was tense, unlike the way most people stand relaxed. It was like she was getting ready to lunge at me, and that's when she took one slow step toward me. My gut immediately went cold, like my brain hadn't caught up yet, but something in me knew it was off. I took an immediate step back, and for a couple seconds we both just stood there. Until it happened again. She stepped forward and I stepped back, and the only way I can describe it is the feeling of being prey. I shined my flashlight at her and finally saw her face, or where her face should have been, and there was nothing. Just smooth skin, completely blank, with like places where eyes and a nose and a mouth should have been but weren't. Just smooth skin. And then she started moving fast, like running straight at me, and I took off. I've never run that fast in my life. I could hear her footsteps behind me getting closer every time I looked back until I got to my house. I also want to mention this is a man-made graveyard. It's not smooth. It's very uneven and not uncommon to trip a lot there, and that's what I was doing, but I never heard this lady trip once. I reached my porch and turned around and she was gone. Just the trees, the neighbors' houses, and the empty streets. But the stillness and quiet was still there. I stood there shaking, trying to breathe, because I've been doing this kind of thing for years and nothing has ever scared me like that woman did. I went back the next morning in the daylight. Everything looked normal again, but it didn't feel right. The air felt heavier, just like the night before. I haven't gone back since that day. I moved away a few months later and I don't go ghost hunting anymore. So this person wants to be anonymous, but this did happen in a small town in Texas. I'm not going to say where, but I live in a small town in Texas. So this just hit home for me, y'all. Once again, I am home alone and super creeped out. I don't know why I do this to myself.
I just came across this really weird story, and it's a short one, but I'm gonna read it word for word, and you can let me know what you think. It's from an anonymous person. They write, "When I was about 7, I was home alone while my parents were out running errands. I wanted to get some sleep as that night we had a barbecue in the backyard. When I walked into my room, a sense of unease came over me, making me feel very uncomfortable. I got further into the room and it became darker and darker. When I switched the light on, the room appeared upside down for a good few seconds. I blinked repeatedly until it went back to normal. I brushed it off as nothing, but when my parents came home, I told them what happened, and they were confused too. That night, I felt so scared that I wet myself." Now here's the really creepy part. They write, "As my mom came to help clean me up, I looked out the window and I saw my dad on the roof of the other house on all fours staring right back at me." They go, "I was too scared to say anything back in case my mom was like that too." Like what too? Also, who leaves their 7-year-old home alone? I have so many questions. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you have your own creepy story time, please submit it to the email in my bio. I would love to share it, and anonymously if you'd like.
Hi Daisy. When I separated from my ex-husband, I moved to Washington State from Massachusetts to be closer to my family. I stayed with my parents for a few months until I was able to get an affordable place of my own. In February 2016, I moved into a 2-bedroom apartment. I became friends with another parent who lived in the neighborhood across from me. He was a nice guy who had moved to Washington with his family from Arizona. Our kids were similar in age and they attended the same school. I had only been in the apartment for a few weeks when my neighbor approached me one day while I was getting groceries out of my car. He said, "Hey, if you ever have any issues with the neighbor who lives above you, just know you're not the problem. Other people in this neighborhood have had issues with her, and management has moved her around at least 3 times. I've never had any problems with neighbors in the past, so I was hoping that I wouldn't have any issues with her." Nonetheless, I took heed to his words of caution. Well, problems started when my children were laughing and playing in the living room while watching television. My neighbor abruptly came downstairs and proceeded to bang on my door. My mom, who was visiting at the time, answered the door and she apologized to my neighbor. She looked really upset, but she accepted the apology and left. I got the feeling that my neighbor did not like me very much. There were a few occasions where I would catch her peering at me through the blinds of her window. I also began to experience unusual things happening in my home. For instance, when I was cleaning my kitchen, a cup was tossed across the kitchen counter. Another time, when I was home alone, the lid from my trash can was aggressively knocked off. One day, while I was sitting in my car getting ready to leave, my neighbor drove up and parked a few spaces away from me. I watched as she got out of her car with a friend whom I recognized as the assistant manager. She aggressively walked over to my apartment and threw some type of substance on my doormat. After that, I began to experience even more frightening phenomenons in my home, not just the casual objects moving here and there. One night, I was sleeping in bed and I began to experience sleep paralysis. My eyes were halfway open and I felt the pillow next to me move and hover over my face. I could actually see the pillow as it came down onto my face, as if an invisible force was attempting to smother me with it. I was having difficulty breathing, so in my
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
I hate that I've tried to record this a few times and I keep having a technical difficulty. Gotta love it. So, when I was in my very early 20s, I was engaged. I moved to Virginia with my ex-fiance and it didn't work out. It was a really rough experience and I had to get home right away. So, I'm going home. I don't know where I'm going to be staying. My dad no longer lives in San Diego where I'm from. So, I'm like, shoot, where am I going to go? My grandmother calls me and she tells me that my mom's house is currently vacant. My mom has extreme manic depressive bipolar and she's just generally a very selfish individual. So she and I do not communicate. But my grandmother shares with me that she is removed from her home currently and she has no idea what state the home is in, but it is habitable for me so I can live there while I figure out a roommate situation where I'm going to live. So I reluctantly say, okay, this is what I have to do. So I get to the house. It is not in a very good neighborhood. It's a townhome, but I have it to myself. And I'm a little sketched out more of the neighborhood than anything else, but whatever. This is where I'm going to live because this is where I have to. So I open the front door for the very first time, get the key and open it. And this wave of like intense heaviness washes over me. And I am just overwhelmed with the state of the home. Like right when you walk in, there's the living room and the stairs. And, I just look to the left in the living room and it's in shambles. You can tell like the couch has a dent in it. She's been laying in it for so long. And I'm just like, ugh, I don't want to be here. And I feel this like intense heaviness. And I don't take that as a red flag right away. I just think, oh, it feels heavy because it's my mom's house and I don't want to be here. And I've just gone through this traumatic event in my life and whatever, we'll make the best of it. So looking around the house, I can see that the kitchen is disgusting. Like there's rotted food, like in the fridge, on the counter, in the sink. It's disgusting. I go upstairs and her room is dark and icky and I don't want to be in there. So I just pass it. So up the stairs, there's her room at the top of the bathroom and then the guest room. So I'm like, whatever, I will start with the guest room and make it my own, clean it, take care of it. Because my mom's manic bipolar, she collects. So the guest room took a very long time, putting things away, reorganizing furniture, cleaning, throwing away trash. I am finally starting to make some headway on the guest room and feeling pretty good about it. So one night I'm sleeping and I wake up, I'm on my side and I wake up and I see the alarm clock and it's the magic hour. It's 3 a.m. So I'm like, great. And as that's processing, I realize I can feel something at the side of the bed. Demanding, like standing there, almost like you can't hear or feel breathing, but there's like this intensity. And I'm like, oh, I know what this is. I know exactly what this is. And if you know about these things, if you hear something, no, you didn't. If you see something, no, you don't. Keep moving. So I'm like, whatever. And I go to bed. When I wake up in the morning, I realize, okay, this is what we're dealing with. So I don't know exactly what I'm dealing with, but I just choose to ignore it. So I finish cleaning up the room and I start making my way towards cleaning the living room and the main level. So as I'm going up and down the stairs, clean the main level, and the house is getting lighter, it's feeling airier, it's feeling healthier, like the vibe is feeling healthier, I start to smell this nasty, rotting smell at the top of the stairs. When you like go up the stairs, you see her room right away, and every single time, just this intense, nasty smell. And I'm like, oh God, I know what this is, but I just have to ignore it. So I keep cleaning, keep making the space feel better, all the while basically cohabiting with this being that desperately wants my attention. And I know it wants my attention. The best way I can describe whatever this was is that it was not human. Also a red flag. This was not a spirit. This was a thing. It felt young. It felt curious about me. It almost felt like I got this vibe, like, where's the other one at? Like my mom, like, where's the other one at? Like, it wanted her negative energy and her like rotting that she would do. And I didn't give that. I was providing positivity and brightness and openness to this new space. And it was not happy with me for that. As I was cleaning the home, I would generally avoid my mother's room. One, because I don't have a relationship with her, so I didn't really care to be in her room or clean it. That's her business. But also just the darkness in there. And like, I swear sometimes that door was open and I would close it. Sometimes I would go to the top of the stairs, smell the smell, see the darkness in her room, and just be like, why is that door even open? And for some reason that room like called to me. And I went in a couple times and like went through her things, which is so not like me. I have no interest in going through her things, but I remember going in there, and I don't remember much of what happened while I was in there. I remember going through like old pictures of me and my sister from when we were kids. I remember going through her closet, but that's about it. And the whole time I would be in there, I would just feel like warbly and off, like very out of body experience. There's a filter kind of like this. Like, these are kind of like my memories of being in that room, like going through pictures, going through the closet. I don't really remember much. So I'm really starting to make progress on the cleaning. I've accepted that I'm cohabitating with this little creature, whatever it is. So I'm minding my business, and I don't hang out in places that it likes, primarily my mom's room and the living room, where she would rot for days and weeks. I just mostly hung out in the guest room when I wasn't cleaning or working or trying to find a place, and I would watch TV on my laptop. So finally, D-Day comes. It's time to get to the kitchen. I'm going in and out of the kitchen from the guest room. I avoided that living room. Guest room, down the stairs, through the hallway, kitchen. And I'm watching TV on my laptop, holding it, walking through the hallway. And lately, I feel like the being had kind of just accepted I wasn't going to give it attention, but I was still ever present that it was there. And I knew I wouldn't hang out with it in the living room. So I'm walking into the kitchen, holding my laptop, living room behind me, kitchen in front of me. And my laptop just dies. Just the black mirror just dies. And I know it's charged. I know I charged it. So I'm like, what the heck? And something comes over me. I realize, do not look at that computer and do not turn around. Like, deep in my soul, like, do not. This thing wants your attention. It wants either to show you it in that black mirror or to get you to turn around to go back into that room. You're going to see something if you look in this laptop screen or turn around. So I just shut the laptop, walk into the kitchen, keep cleaning. Like, I didn't even notice the laptop had died. After a few minutes, I go, oh, my laptop died. Like, audibly say it. Like, I pretend I didn't notice, and go get the charger, bring the charger back down into the kitchen, and keep cleaning. After the home was pretty much cleaned, within a few days, I ended up finding a roommate and finding a place. So I moved out, left that behind, never experienced that little creature or critter ever again, thank goodness. But yeah, that was a really intense, it was like a battle of wills. This thing was almost like a child, but it wasn't a human, but it felt like a childlike presence. And it was just, look at me, demanding my attention. And I wouldn't give it any attention. So we just were kind of fighting over who was going to get their way. And I just ignored it until it went away or I was able to leave. I don't speak to my mom much. I never told her about this experience, but from what I understand in the times I do have to interact with her, she has gotten a new place. And this is kind of what confirms for me that this was not a ghost, because ghosts haunt places. other things haunt people. And my mom has said, or I have heard, that in her new place, she has suddenly stopped liking to stay in her guest room or her master bedroom, and she sleeps in the guest room because something in the master doesn't feel right, and it feels like she's not alone in her master bedroom. And yeah, it's kind of crazy. I realize that sounds like a script or like a baseline for a really messed up movie, and it could have gone a lot worse than it did. Thank God it didn't. But no, that's a true story. And as far as I know, that thing still hangs out with my mom and her negative energy to this day.
Those stories from Mexico just hit different. This story scared the shit out of me. My lights just literally went out. I am not fucking kidding you. All the lights in the house are off. What the fuck? That's how you know this is a scary story. Okay, let's try this again. That really freaked me out. Dana is around 17 or 18 years old at this time. Dana was around 17 or 18 years old at this time, and her mom and her sister moved into like a rental house. It was like a ranch-style house. The house had 2 rooms in it. Her mom and her sister shared a room, and her older sister shared a room. I'm so freaked out right now. So the first few days are okay for her, but it's around like the second week is when she started to feel like she was being watched, and she was getting chills a lot. Now, Dana really liked to stay up late and read books, and one night she's staying up late and she's reading a book, and she starts to hear this whispering sound, but she can't make out what it's saying. Now, Dana was super sleep deprived at this point, so she didn't really get spooked, but then she started hearing the voices during the day. And she would ask everybody, like her sisters, are you hearing this? And nobody was hearing anything except for her. And then the voices started to get louder. She starts getting paranoid. She can't sleep. And then one night she starts hearing the voices and they become clearer. She hears her name and it's being chanted. Dana, Dana, Dana. She starts telling her mom about this because she thinks that she's losing her mind. This is when her mom tells her something terrifying. Her mom tells her that the owner of the house told her that an older woman had passed away in that house and that people would sometimes see this older woman peeking out of Dana's room. So her mom's like, listen, start praying before you go to bed and this is going to help you. And so she does that. She starts to pray and things get worse. She would not sleep and she would cry at night because the voices were just getting worse and louder. She starts pulling her hair and scratching herself. And one night she's in bed and her sister is also in the room. Her sister's asleep and she's reading a book and she starts to get chills. So she slowly looks up and there's a woman floating mid-air. Her face was white and she had black eyes and long black hair and she seemed to be wearing a white nightgown. Now in this moment, the woman is not looking at her, but as soon as Dana looked up, the woman slowly turns her head and looks straight at her. Dana's heart is beating out of her chest at this point. She said it literally hurt. She said it all happened so fast and by the time she blinked, the woman is just gone. So at this point, Dana is absolutely terrified. So she starts yelling her sister's name until she finally wakes up and her sister is like, what is going on? What is wrong with you? And she's like, I just saw a woman. And she just starts crying her eyes out. She then runs over to her sister's bed and she's like, can I please sleep with you? And her sister lets her sleep with her. And now her sisters didn't really believe her at first until they saw her crying. The scary thing was Dana was the only thing hearing anything in the house or seeing anything in the house. Nobody else was. But when she told her mother did go to the church and she got holy water and she sprayed it all around the house. She continues to hear the voices at this point, but she does not see the woman again. But one night she's chilling in her bed. It's around 10 p.m. when suddenly she starts to get chills again. So she slowly looks at her door and it's open. There's this man with black eyes and this disgusting smile on his face and he's just peeking into the room. So she's like, hell no. So she goes and tells her mom again and she is freaking out. So her mom goes and takes her to a pastor and the pastor is like, listen, you need to start going to church. So he gives them holy water again and she starts going to church and she does not see anything anymore, but she continues to hear the whispers. The whispers continued everywhere she went, right? But she started to get used to it at this point. It didn't bother her anymore because she was desensitized to it. And then she ends up moving to the US. And as soon as she moves to the US, the whispers just stop. She still does not understand who or what was whispering to her and why it was only choosing her to bother. But then she starts to wonder, did this all start because of something that happened to her when she was 8 years old? And this part is the most terrifying part of the story. So when Dana was 8 years old, she lived with her aunt in Modesto, California. She lived with 6 female cousins there, her mom, her older sister, and her aunt. When she was this age, she used to speak back a lot and she would get grounded a lot for it. So she took up drawing. That was like her, to pass her time when she was grounded, she would draw. Well, her and her sister shared a room and inside the room there was this old TV, but it was just there as storage. One day, her and her sister are in their room and she's drawing and her sister's trying to talk to her and she's just ignoring her. When suddenly she notices something out of the corner of her her eye in the TV reflection. She sees a little girl with a white face and black eyes, same as the other woman, and it's just crouching down and staring at her. So Dana starts yelling, "Look, there's a little girl, there's a little girl." And her sister turns and looks, and she doesn't see anything. She's like, "What are you talking about?" So Dana decides to draw this little girl, and she does, and she shows her sister, and her sister gets terrified, and she goes and tells her aunt. Her aunt completely ignores this, and her sister just kind of gives her a side eye. But Dana becomes obsessed with this little girl, and she starts drawing her all the time. Thing is, though, is she never saw her again. Well, a few years later, when she's 14 years old, she goes back to Mexico, and she goes to live with her grandmother. And she said that her grandmother's house was just haunted. It was terrifying. She said one day she was in the kitchen, she walks over to the sink, and she suddenly hears something. There's this growling, masculine voice growling in her ear. She said that this kind of became a thing. Every time that she went to the sink, she would hear this growling in her ear. She then said that one day she's in her room and she wakes up at like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because she hears this shaking sound. And she looks over at her door, and her door is just violently shaking. Not a little bit, it's violently shaking. Then her dogs start barking, and they are barking all night long. Well, she has no choice but to ignore this, so she eventually falls asleep. Well, the next day she wakes up and it's raining, and her and her grandmother go to the store. Well, when they come back from the store, they walk inside of the house, and her sisters are absolutely distraught. And her and her grandmother are like, "What is going on?" And her sisters tell them that while they were home alone, they heard some woman laughing hysterically outside of the house. So her grandmother's like, "Look, just pray and everything will be okay. Like, you guys have to use God, just pray." Well, Dana at this point is like, "Okay, I have to go to the bathroom." So she walks into the bathroom and she hears what sounds like this little girl in the bathroom. And she is like, "What is that noise?" And then she hears very clearly, "Come play with me." She said that this scared her so bad that she was literally shaking with fear. Now, she doesn't know if all of this is correlated, but the woman laughing outside and then her seeing the woman floating in the air and then the little girl that she was obsessed with that looked exactly like the woman, wondering if this is the same entity. And yes, I should have told that story in reverse. I should have told the last part first and the first part last, but I actually didn't see that second part until after I was already done telling the story, and I was not about to do the video all over again. But what did you guys think about that story? I think that is super creepy. I definitely think that she has an attachment and has her whole life. I think she has a gift because she keeps getting chills in every house that she goes to, and then she sees a spirit. I think that's a sign of her gift, and I think that she needs to learn how to either block it or utilize it. That is just my opinion. It's scary to have a gift, you know? Sometimes you don't want to have it because you hear and see things that are really scary. But if you learn how to use it, it can be a good thing. I just hope that you get the help that you need, Dana, because I want your life to be easier. I don't want you to be scared all the time because I know you still hear this whispering. The fact that my power went out while I was telling this story and then went back on 2 seconds later and then the lights flickered, that was terrifying. I don't even know how I continued to tell the story. I had to take like a 30-minute break there because that really scared me. But whether it was related to the story or not, but if you guys have any thoughts, opinions, or suggestions, please drop them in the comments. But as always, please be respectful. Before I do the shout outs, I did make a video on this, you guys, today, but this is my merch. It says right here, Kaisa, Scary Spooky Stories with a little ghost heart. And it also says spooky kisses and haunted hugs in the back. Ignore the dog hair, please. There are also hoodies and crew necks and this tumbler right here. It says Kaisa, Scary Spooky Stories. And then it has spooky kisses and haunted hugs on the back. Now, you can also have a shirt say, if God brought you to it, he'll take you through it. And you can have that written on the tumbler or on the shirt, sweaters, or crew necks. But now let's go into my favorite part, which is the shout outs. Hippie Heart 74, you said you love my community and how positive it is here and that you love my stories, and that means so much to me. I love my community so much. I feel like the luckiest person in the world to have it. So thank you for saying that, and thank you for being a part of my community. I truly appreciate your kindness. Like, you are part of it now, and that was such an awesome comment. It made me feel so good, and I just hope that you know how much I appreciate you supporting me and just being kind. Thank you so much. I love you, girl. King_Nessa93, you are so sweet. You said that you can't sleep without my stories. I love that so much. Thank you so much for supporting me like that and watching them every single day. Thank you for being a part of my community. Thank you for being kind. Thank you for liking me so much. Like, I love it when people like my stories enough to watch them every single day. I feel so lucky and humbled to have that. So thank you for being a part of that. And I hope you also know how much I truly, truly appreciate you. Thank you so much. I love you, girl. And with that being said, my name is Kaisa, and I tell true scary stories on here every single night that you guys submit to me. So if you're into that, hit that follow button. I just need you to do 3 things for me. And what are those? Keep sending me your scary stories. Have a safe night. And what's the third one? Say it with me. Have a spooky night. Love you guys so much. See you in the next one. Spooky kisses and haunted hugs.
This happened at a ranch called La Lima in San Luis Potosí. So this guy says that when they were really young, they used to go to this ranch with their grandfather to the sugarcane farm. This particular morning, the grandfather told them that he couldn't take them with him, and instead he took 2 of his friends. It was a good distance away, so they went ahead and started walking to the sugarcane farms. They did a lot of work, and by the time the sun was going down, the grandfather decided, hey, let's stay the night here because tomorrow we would need to continue to do more work, and that's what the plan was. The only issue was that they realized that they didn't take any food to eat for the night. So the grandfather, being that it was his idea to stay the night there, he decided to volunteer himself to walk all the way back home, get some food, and then bring it all the way back to them. He does make it back home, and by this time it's already night, it's dark, and his wife does make some lunches for him and the guys back at the farm. With the food in one hand and the lantern in the other, he starts making his way back to the guys. He also had his dogs with him that he decided to let loose so that they can keep him company. He did get to a point where it was like a little bit of a foresty part, and he does know that there's a lot of animals there, and the dogs did start barking, but they were ahead of him. That little foresty part was only like a small amount that he had to cross to get to where the other guys are, but when he finally made it to where the dogs were in that foresty part of the walk, he said that he started hearing like a horse galloping in his direction. Out of nowhere, the dogs just stopped barking, and he says that everything just stayed very eerily quiet. That's when he noticed that there was a horse coming in his direction, and it had a man on the horse, but he couldn't make out any facial features or anything like that. When the guy on the horse finally got in front of him, he says that for some reason he had the weird feeling that told him do not look at the guy. As he's looking down, the horse is next to him, and the guy's on top of the horse. Again, he is not looking up at that guy. He says that the guy says to him, hey friend, where are you going? And that he responded, oh, I'm going to the sugarcane farm. My friends are out there waiting for me to bring them food. The guy on the horse then asked him, do you want to ride? I can take you there. And the grandfather said, no, I'm okay. I'd rather go walking. The guy on the horse was like, come on, let me take you there. It'll be a lot faster. You'll get there in no time. And he, still looking down, not looking at him, was like, no, thank you. I appreciate the offer, but I prefer walking. The man on the horse then said, okay, that's fine. Extended his arm to the grandfather so that they can shake it and then be on their way. And the grandfather says that he did end up shaking his hand. When he shook his hand, he noticed that the hand was very hairy and that the nails were extremely long. So they shook hands. The grandfather went about his way. He heard the horse go back the way he was coming, but he says that after walking for about 5 minutes, he felt the craziest sensation, like if somebody had thrown a bucket of cold water at his back. And because of that feeling, he kneeled down to the ground and started praying. After praying, he does get back up again, and he said that he did feel a lot better. Crazy thing was that after he got on his knees, prayed, stood up, and felt better, he then started to hear all the animals around him again too. The entire time, the interaction with that person, the 5-minute walk, he hadn't seen his dogs either. And after he prayed and started hearing all the animals, his dogs finally came out of these bushes that they had been hiding in. Thankfully, they were fine, and he said that he finally made it to where his friends were waiting for him to eat. He didn't mention anything to his friends when he got there, and they just started eating their dinner. By the time they were done, it was around 11 at night, and he said that they went back to the sugar farms just to finish up some details that they didn't want to do the next day. Once they finished, they went back to that little camp where they were about to go to sleep, and he says that one of the friends was there with him, so he's like, let me at least tell him what happened because it was really weird. After he tells them the story, they agreed that they were going to tie up the dogs and just leave the fire going so that it wouldn't go out and they would at least have light around where they were sleeping. Around 3 in the morning, they were woken up by the dogs who were barking very desperately. The grandfather got up and went to see what's wrong with the dogs, and he realized that the friend that he had told what happened to, he was no longer asleep there with him. So he goes to the other spot where his other friend is sleeping. He wakes him up and he lets the dog loose so that hopefully they can run to where the friend who's missing is at. They got the lanterns, and on the way they started to hear screams coming from their friend. They ended up finding him where there was a part of grass that was full of thorns. Anybody could get hurt if they had walked into there. When they finally got to where he was, the friend was screaming and asking them to get him out of there. The only way that they were able to get to where he was by cutting all of those thorns in the grass with a machete. When they inspected the friend's body just to see if he had any thorns stuck to him or anything like that, he didn't have any thorns nor any scratches all over his body, which you would think he would because he was in the middle of everything. What they did notice though was that he was really pale, like scared. In the morning, they did end up taking him home because after taking him out of there, he was like in shock. He couldn't even like articulate a full sentence. That friend did remain bedridden for 3 whole days. He did end up getting a fever and it almost seemed like he was sick. After that 3rd day, he was finally able to speak and he requested to speak with the guy who's telling us the story, the grandfather, the one who saw the guy on the horse and told them the story. The grandfather does end up going to his home and visits him, and that's where his friend finally tells him what happened that night. He explains that he had a dream of the man that he had described to him in the same area of that foresty place, and that he in his dream was in that area. The guy came up to him with the horse. The only difference was that he agreed for that guy to give him a ride back to the sugarcane farm. After that, he woke up in the middle of that grassy and thorny patch. Like, he was dreaming about this and somehow woke up in the middle of all those thorns. Month by month after that, the guy, it did seem like he was getting better and better, but unfortunately 4 months after being bedridden, he did end up passing away. After that, the grandfather just kept thinking like, what would have happened to me if I had actually taken the ride from that guy? Because what happened to my friend happened in a dream, and this is how everything came to be. So he cannot imagine what would have happened if he had taken that ride in real life. I don't even want to think about what would have happened, but what do you guys think that was? Who was that person on that horse?